I actually get a number of people emailing me asking, when are you doing your next book report?
It's good. So Adam Grant,
Hidden potential.
the hidden potential part of it is kind of taps into that idea that we're all have more that we could develop. There's more that we could do to be better at the stuff that's important to us. And I sort of feel like after Malcolm Gladwell popularized that 10,000 hours to get world class at anything, it was sort of this idea that if you want to get really, really good at something, you've just got to grind away at it.
The book is kind of broken down into 3 sections: build character skills, set up scaffolding to overcome obstacles, and then build systems of opportunity.
Yeah, actually, world-class performance, that's not probably the recipe you want to follow unless you had a really messed up childhood or something like that. But, you know, for most people...
a messed up adulthood.
Yes.
Buddy, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, really well. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. We're getting back to the book report thing again. I actually get a number of people emailing me asking, when are you doing your next book report thing? So it's actually of the things that I've done, it would seem that there's a loyal little listener group amongst the Marketing in Practice podcasters that enjoy this. So
yeah. Similarly, I have people sort of saying, I haven't heard one of these lately. When's the next one going to go up? So yeah, it's good. So Adam Grant.
Yes, so who I'd never heard of before you had put me onto him, and now I'm on his email list and following a lot of his stuff there too. And so the book, this was one that you suggested. I really loved it. Hidden Potential.
Yes.
Adam Grant. So why don't you lead the floor away? And
okay. Yeah, so I guess by way of background, Adam Grant, I have this real sweet spot for books like this, which... if I look sort of the books that I think have the most impact on me are those ones where there's a very practical aspect to it, but there's also that kind of discipline of the academic there as well. So the super academic ones where they're just describing a whole lot of research without then an application for it. Just, you know, there's not a lot of, you sort of keep going, well, what's the point? And the ones where it's just somebody writing, well, what I think, I sort of feel like, well, I want some evidence for it. Whereas Adam Grant's kind of I like it. There's a lot of basis for it. That's so background for him. I really like his stuff. This book specifically, the hidden potential part of it is kind of taps into that idea that we're all have more that we could develop. There's more that we could do to be better at the stuff that's important to us. And I thought he had some really unique takes on it that are useful for us. Probably the first just big picture thing, I sort of feel like after Malcolm Gladwell popularized that 10,000 hours to get world class at anything, and the ideas around deep practice that have been popularized, it was sort of this idea that if you want to get really, really good at something, you've just got to grind away at it. Whereas I thought this was like, actually, world-class performance, that's not probably the recipe you want to follow unless you had a really messed up childhood or something like that. But, you know, for most people...
a messed up adulthood.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So that, I guess, big picture, it's got a whole lot of really useful strategies that we can go into in a minute in terms of what we could do. And the big picture was, actually, you can get really good at things and it can be rewarding and enjoyable and doesn't have to be this sacrificial self-flagellation to get good at stuff.
I found it super engaging. It's one of the more enjoyable books I've read of recent. And he really is asking a lot of that kind of nature versus nurture question and answers that too. And even some little ideas, like some things that sort of stick to mind. He was referencing kind of world-class musicians. And then on average, you know, during their teenage high school years, most of them practiced an hour a day. And that's not what I kind of figured they would be doing. Like I can't imagine 3 and 4 times that amount. And that, you know, again, he went back and looked at across lots of different disciplines, is that most of these people were not standing out in any kind of profound way in their high school years. It was the consistency and this idea, not necessarily how high that you have climbed, but how far you've gone and as well. So that I found really engaging as well. I was like, okay, got it. Keep going.
Yeah. So I guess for me, the the first sort of piece of it, the first topic, I guess, that he went through was sort of the things connected to character that he was using the description of a group of chess kids playing chess who came from a very different socioeconomic background from classically the kids who get good at chess, and that what the coach of that group really engaged was these character aspects to help them grow rather than it being some innate talent that you had to have. And I guess the short version of the character for me is really just that idea of putting what's important to you ahead of what you feel like doing at the time. That that to get good at something, you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be a degree of discomfort at pushing yourself. And he talks later in the book about ways that you can almost soften that discomfort or recontextualize that discomfort. And that it really then is about that idea of focusing on, well, what's the big picture? Why is it important that I get good at this? And for me, I think for us as chiropractors, it's very easy to say, I was looking through the lens a lot of how do I help people in my sort of sphere of influence develop communication skills. And a lot of it was, that feels uncomfortable, and role playing can feel a bit dorky and weird, and you got in a groove of the way you communicate things. And if you actually really want to help people live a healthier, happier, more active life, then it's a little bit of discomfort to go through to connect to that bigger purpose.
I think there was a couple of bits of that too. I wonder, even for some context too, the book is kind of broken down into 3 sections that build character skills, set up scaffolding to overcome obstacles, and then build systems of opportunity. The third part of the book actually didn't interest me all that much. Well, actually, the third part I found interesting but not applicable.
Yes.
But that character thing at the start, you talk about, kind of had me at hello. I could have stopped reading after that, and it would have been, because he gives a reference, talks about those chess players. But the thing that stood out in my mind, maybe reference some kind of third world entrepreneurs that were businesses of different ages, from kind of 20s, 30s, 40s, and both of them were given kind of 2 weeks, a week of training, one on kind of classical kind of business stuff, finances, marketing, that sort of stuff, and the others were given kind of character training, so courage, discipline. I think there was one other thing, I don't know if you can remember.
I think it was proactivity is what comes to mind.
Yes. And then they kind of measured over the following 2 years. And I think there was an extra 30% growth in the businesses of those that just had the character training. And so his kind of conclusion of that was a couple of things. Is the importance of character training there too. But the second thing was that we can learn these things, because often I'll hear people say, oh, I'm just not that disciplined, or, I'm not a proactive person, or I don't have courage. It's like one of these things that's been bestowed upon us, and for those lucky to have it. But that's what I found, like, great, we can learn this stuff. They're learnable skills. So that, for me, again, probably that was my biggest take home in terms of character. It's learnable. There's evidence to suggest that's the case. And it trumps kind of other learning, because it helps to put us in, I forget what his quote is or one I popped from there too, but, personality is how we are on our best days, and, character is how we are on our worst days, something like that. So, so that section there, I loved that stuff.
Yeah. And it sort of reminded me, one of my favorite practices, or one of my favorite quotes rather, is a quote from years ago. Frank Savinsky said, great practices are built on the days that you don't feel like it. And I sort of feel like, to a degree, his stuff about character was a bit similar, where it was like, there is just an element of that proactivity and discipline that you just have to do. And the thing that I felt like his perspective added to that was, I've always looked at that almost in all right, you just kind of got to grind it through. Whereas Adam Grant's perspective is, actually, there are ways that you can learn to be more disciplined, and there's scaffolding that you can create that makes it easy to just keep going with things. So, one of the ideas I think you and I spoke about after the Gap and the Gain, that Benjamin Hardy book,
Yep.
was that idea of just, keeping momentum by just really measuring backwards, sort of going a little bit, looking at, well, where have I come from? What did I achieve today? What did I achieve this week? And just little
Yes.
small incremental improvements. And to me, it's a little bit similar to this, where we often think of discipline and proactivity as these big, grandiose things of, I've just got to be committed to pushing things ahead with my practice for the next 5 years to get things going. Whereas my sort of interpretation of what he was saying was, yeah, look, if you just put in place some simple steps to keep you at your best self, then, and you're not trying to change everything at once, because, what leads to high level performance is really just doing things over a long enough period of time to get good at it, and then some intentional picking up things that are likely to be impactful and maybe don't feel the easiest for you to do. But, it's pretty, to me, a hopeful kind of message of, yeah, it's just really a matter of keeping going.
Yeah. And so that idea in terms of, all right, it's probably going to make sense. And if we think of this from a practice point of view, that if I have more courage, discipline, proactivity, to do things I know I ought to be doing, but not. And in order for me to be able to do that, probably the next skill set or aligning skill set with that is I just have to change my relationship with discomfort.
Yep.
And
yep.
It's this one here I'm fascinated about. So I had this guy who I coached. He's not a client at the moment, but still a good friend. And he had in his personal life some areas of just elite performance. So he was an elite level athlete, masters level athlete. Okay, really gifted runner and cyclist, and his practice didn't match that level of performance.
Yep.
And when I asked questions in around, what do you do and how do you respond in difficult situations when you're racing, for instance. So I'm like, imagine that you're the final 20% of a 1 mile race. Lungs are burning. The guy in front of you is kind of, 20 meters ahead. How does that feel? And he lit up in excitement. Like, I live for this stuff. Like the burning in my legs. Like you could just hear him talking about it there too. And then to even say, well, okay, let's imagine that scenario though, and you actually lost the race. What's the conversation that goes on inside your mind then? He goes, I got to learn from this. I can get better. Like there's an opportunity here for me. So just elite level. And yet get inside the practice and instead of being on an athletics track, put the same challenges in front of him. And his relationship with discomfort couldn't have been different. Like the two of us, as we're having the conversation, it was fascinating. And my realization at that level there too is that most people are going to have some areas where they're really good with discomfort. Like the whole point of most gym workouts is we kind of, get to that rep until it burns. And then we know, I'm winning now. And so how do we start to take bits of that? And that's been a conversation I've had numerous times since with people of going, all right, catching myself in awareness that I'm feeling discomfort at the moment. That means I'm growing. And linking those things together have been, for me personally, and conversations with clients as well, has been just really profoundly helpful. So
I feel like as well that he talks in the book about that distinction between perfection and progress, and that we need to have a focus if we're looking at that. Often the people who are drawn to read a book like Hidden Potential are people who have really high standards, and sometimes the extreme version of that might be perfectionism, this idea that I can't stop this until this is perfect, or I can't put out my newsletter until it's perfect, or I can't, start to promote this talk until it's perfect. And what if somebody doesn't like it, and those sort of connected thoughts. And I thought that idea of him saying, look, you actually need to embrace mistakes, embrace discomfort, and almost bringing a sense of play or humor to, well, all right, just that didn't go, that wasn't perfect. So you can just move on and go, well, I've got some feedback that I can improve on and learn from. Or, having that lightness of, well, it's just a game. I can have a bit of a laugh about it. So, I felt like that part of it was really, really useful.
Yes, certainly. Progress, not perfection there too. Or I think he kind of even referenced excellence as well as a kind of reference point there too. So
because I think sometimes that I push back a little bit against that done is better than perfect idea. So I sort of like it, but sometimes done doesn't have a qualifier of done to a level of excellence, which I think was the distinction that he made, where it's like, yeah, you can have high standards and you can say this needs to be excellent because excellence is achievable, but mastery isn't. But perfect
Perfection.
isn't.
Yeah.
Perfection isn't necessarily
Well,
achievable.
I wonder, I learned from the Brooke Castillo, a woman who I did my coaching stuff through. She's got this concept, and one of her mantras is that B minus work will make you very rich.
Yeah,
Um, and and so I've borrowed that a lot, and I teach that a lot. And I think there's some areas where I really encourage chiropractors to be B minus, but I'm really clear. Please don't deliver a B minus adjustment.
yeah,
And but a social media post or a video that you put out there too. If they're B minus, we just got to know where these areas are. And the good thing about B minus is that the B minus of today hopefully is might be A plus of what I could have produced. It forever keeps on
yeah,
going up there. But there has to be somewhere. You're right. Done is better than perfect. Kind of, you're right. It makes sense in some ways, but if we can have a qualifier on there that we want a certain amount of.
yeah,
But my experience is this: I have chiropractors send me videos most weeks where I act as their video conscience for them. And
hmm,
I'm saying, let me be a conscience of whether it's postable or not. And there would be 1 in 20 videos I send back and go, nah, here's
yeah,
what you need to approve before posting that. So I think there's a realization in that is that very often we're our own harshest marker.
mm, yeah,
Um, in terms of saying, what does done mean for me and stuff like that too. They're all things that we need to think. And that's why, you know, having a group around you, and I know he talks about that in terms of scaffolding and stuff like that,
yeah,
support structure around there to go, to help you. Yeah, this is good enough to get
yeah,
started with at this stage there too. If we all waited till we delivered an excellent adjustment before we actually delivered one, none of us would have started. So,
yeah. Yeah.
you know,
And so I guess I looked at it through that lens of primarily a chiropractic audience. The benefit in this is to see, if you want to increase, whether it's your adjusting skill or your communication skill or your social media skill or any of those sort of things, that it was a template for that. And a lot of the change is almost that attitudinal change, because
yeah.
the key to getting good to any of them is just to actually do it over and over and over again and listen to the feedback.
And that's where he goes into, maybe if you want to talk about this next point now, unless there's anything else, the idea of kind of turning practice into play, because you kind of hinted at
Yeah.
this to begin with. So
Yeah.
as opposed to the slog of, 3 hours of grind on the piano every day,
Yeah.
how can this become play? In fact, you had a name for it there too. Was it just active play or
Harmonious.
something?
Oh, no, yeah, deliberate play. Was
Deliberate
it
play. That's it. Yes.
deliberate play? So I think he's adapting the deliberate practice idea
Yeah.
and then saying, well, yeah, that has that connotation of grind. And then if we turn it into deliberate play, then yeah, it can make it much more joyful. So I actually I've had an opportunity to play with this a little bit, and so one of the areas that I find working with chiropractors that's super challenging for them is I'll teach them a whole lot of communication strategies. This is whether I'm working in a workshop or in the practice development group that I've got. I'll teach a strategy, but the strategy is sort of a really good strategy, but it won't have any impact with them until they develop some skill to actually use it. And for most of them, you want to develop at least part of that skill just through role play in a low stakes environment, like with another chiropractor or with your team or something like that. And most people hate it. Like it's this awkward, uncomfortable, feels artificial sort of thing. And so I've been experimenting a little bit with, well, how could you make it a little bit more playful? And one of the ideas that has seemed to work quite well is this idea of almost, because you're going back and forward, you're basically having a game to see who can come up with the most preposterous scenario that you're introducing it. So rather than doing a role play around, you're doing a bridging in a report of findings, or somebody who their motivation to have care is that they want to be able to pick up their grandkids or get back to golf. It's the same basic mechanics, but you can do it where it could be and I need to be able to perform every position in the Kama Sutra, and I'm
Nice.
getting stuck on page 5 where I'm not able to get like just any of those things where it's like, all right, this engages a bit of creativity. And
Yes.
it's a little bit more light or fun. And then, all right, somebody gave you the Kama Sutra. You've then got to come up with something that maybe in a different way is, I'm having difficulty with my job as a heroin dealer to primary school children because it's just uncomfortable to hang around on the swing set waiting for them to come. Like just any of those things that are just, it's preposterous. But then when
Mm,
you're trying to respond to it in a way that continues the joke or
mm,
continues the theme of it, you're learning the skill, perhaps not in a literal way that you would apply it, but in some ways, I think that might actually be valuable that you're learning the skill in an extreme way. So then when it comes back to applying it to somebody who just needs their headaches to reduce so they can concentrate at work, it's sort of very easy.
yeah. Anything that adds some levity to role play is a win for most people. It does seem to. I feel like I must have struck gold. It's never bothered me all that much as role play. Okay,
No.
let's get it done. But I know, having done it with staff for 25 years, the eye rolling that immediately happens when I talk about kind of role play is,
Yeah.
is super visible. But anything that kind of can make it playful and looking for other angles, that has been something that I've been trying to integrate a lot into kind of even community influencer trainings as well. It's like, okay, where's the playful side of this?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that, I mean, I love that as an example there too. So
And it did make a distinction, like because this is a fairly new concept for me. I don't pretend that I've got all the ways of doing it, but he made a distinction that I thought was super useful, where there was a vogue a few years ago, and I assume it's still probably going, for gamification, that if we turned things into a game with a score, that would motivate people to do things. And I sort of feel like there's some elements of that that's true, and then there's others where it just feels like, oh, this is stupid. Like if I wanted to play a game, I'd get out a game of backgammon, or I'd play not this stupid game that is just been bolted onto something unpleasant to try and trick me into thinking it's not.
yes,
And whereas I feel like he's pretty explicit that it isn't gamification. It's just like bringing a lightness to and having a variety rather than just cranking away at one thing, mixing it up. So he talks a lot about a woman whose name escapes me, who went from, I think she was profoundly deaf, but is now a really sought after percussionist. And that
Jillian
part of,
somebody. It is
yeah,
Jillian.
yeah.
Yeah.
But part of how she developed her skill was, rather than kind of working on the same things again and again, she would, if she's working on one instrument, she will then, and she's getting a bit stale, she just use a different instrument or a different tune, or try and do a completely different version of things. And I sort of am attracted to that idea of, rather than, yeah, look, work on this skill, but if you're feeling stuck and whatever, then mix it up by either introducing that idea of the preposterousness, or working on a different skill, or working on something that feels like it would be fresh and light and enjoyable.
Mm, yeah, loved it. I mean, the concept I thought was great. I've got to admit, at this stage here, I'm looking for kind of practical applications. That, they gave lots of examples in terms of inside of sport where they broke down, talked a lot about Steph Curry, who
Yeah,
many people will know, and breaking down components rather than just kind of standing at the free throw line shooting
yeah,
shots. His coach set up many different games
yeah,
where he got to work on the skills outside of something that just felt like monotonous and
yeah.
lots of repetition. Um, so great concept, of which I've been trying to find out, how do I instigate that, or integrate that rather, into what I'm doing there too. But as you said, I'm a newbie on this also.
Yeah, it feels to me. So there's another related idea that I thought was really useful, that he talks about as the tutor effect. That one of the
Yes.
ways that we learn something really well is by teaching it to other people. And so,
Yep.
in this idea of communication, the couple of things that I'm playing with at the moment are, how do you make it a bit less trying to be exactly like it would be in practice to make
Yeah.
it more. It's a little bit more creative if I'm trying to think of how I would do this. So, one idea that I have that I actually haven't done yet is how would you do a communicate as this component as a charade rather than as using words, so that you're sort of still playing with the concept. But that silliness part of it seems to work quite well. But the
Yeah.
tutor effect part of it is essentially I've structured my aligned practice group where we'll typically have one person in the group, like the chiropractor of the group, but the whole theme of it is that they're going to then train CAs and other people, and we provide them with the resources, and they're actually learning it really, really well by then training other people in the same technique. So that was another thing that I thought of, is rather than looking at if there's a skill that we want to get better at in our practice,
Yes.
or if I'm again looking at this communication piece, then saying, all right, I'm going to teach the principles of this and the application of this to my team helps them, but it also helps you.
Yeah. He really had a bit of a dig at that age-old kind of saying, those that do and those that don't teach.
Teach, yeah.
And kind of went to say so far as, just because somebody is great at doing something doesn't make them a great teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Although teaching something does actually help you to be better at what you're doing. So,
yeah.
It's one thing to have an understanding of something. It's another thing to be able to teach it also. So any opportunity that we have to, and that goes right back to, one of my favorite books of all time, Stephen Covey's. That was kind of his thing at the end of every of the 7 habits. Teach them to somebody. Pick a buddy out to do that. So, and I'm trying to make a habit with that, particularly on this book here and some other stuff that I've learned from Cal Newport of, when I get a concept that I quite like from a book, is for me to sit down and discuss it with Lauren in a way that I can kind of make sense, help her to make sense of it. And I guess this has reminded me of the importance for that. It's enjoyable conversations for us. It helps my level of mastery of it, helps my learning of it also. So, but engaging us, it works so perfectly in terms of engaging our staff in this kind of stuff here also.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I was looking there. To me, the upside of that is that we take all these things where it would be great for me to be better at this, and then once I'm good at it, I can then teach my staff this approach or whatever. It's like, actually, the way to get good at it is to do both at the same time. All right, I'm a newbie at this. I'm going to explain what I know about this to you.
So this matches really interestingly with a concept I've been really nerding out on recently, in terms of looking at results that people want to get in their life, particularly, with regard to growing their practice or anything like that. And then there's a gap between where you are now and then where you want to get to. And there are 2 pathways to kind of closing that gap down. And one of them is a knowledge gap, and the other is an implementation gap. And it's surprising of recent how many times I have a chat with people about it. And it's not a knowledge problem that people are having. It's an implementation problem.
Yeah.
And one of the bridges to help with implementation there too is probably just teach it. It's going to help get that experience of it there too. And it has been it was a realization of mine as a part of a kind of coaching group that I'm in. I'm watching people who are really ahead of me in business.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll come in and teach what's working for them. And month after month, I've pitched up expecting them to show something that's revolutionary different from what I could be doing. And it never is. There are always things I could be doing but are not doing. And it might be a slight tweak on it, but that's it. It's not yet. And so these are people whose businesses are in the, 7, 8, 9 million a month type sort of stuff. And yet, as you talked about right at the beginning of this too, they're just doing the same things consistently at a level over there as well. And, that whole idea, okay, how do I get to implementation? How do I do that? Okay, well, once you've learned to teach it, that idea through the two. And, for me, this phase is, just stop learning new things per se and implement stuff instead. Have the focus be there as opposed to just filling my bucket with more things I'm not going to use. So,
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because to me, this book blends well with ideas from Essentialism, the Greg McKeown book, and
Yep.
that idea of sort of character and proactivity and discipline in
Yes.
terms of they're very abstract concepts. What I found in terms of making that an actionable thing, Greg McKeown has this idea of less but better. And the way that you make that less abstract is you go, well, look, what's really important right now? So it forces you to that proactivity, that discipline of what's the one thing that is important for me to get done this week. And anything, if I get that one thing done, I can view this week as a success. And to me, it's that same sort of thing that this leads to, which is if your one thing is I'm trying to grow my practice, and the lever that I'm pushing on is improving communication or putting out a video or whatever. Well, the one important thing is I need to make that one video, or maybe it's I need to do two videos, or in the scenario, the process that I'm working through with my group, it might be I just need to have two 20-minute practice sessions on this one skill with my team, and then tick that off. I can feel good about the progress of the week. Rather than, I think sometimes when we have this abstract idea of there's all these different things that I could be doing, and you can almost get into the idea, or you can almost pull yourself into feeling like you're busy by doing busy work. So, I'll just listen to this podcast, or I'll just do this that gives me some extra information, but you're not actually doing the work of implementation.
Yeah, 100%. I kind of feel like on that, moving from that idea of, I liked his metaphor of, what you need is a compass rather than a map.
Yeah.
So that desire that I find myself wanting to know all of the moves I need to make to get from A to B, as opposed to saying, am I just, I need to head in the right direction. And provided I'm heading in the right direction, that's probably enough. And to feel confident in the idea that anybody who's done anything great in their life never knew all the steps until they'd completed them. And you don't need to. My metaphor I've been kind of talking a lot with people recently is, for me to get to Portugal in terms of where you have come from recently, like really all I've got to know is how to get to Tullamarine, the airport.
Yeah.
And then from there, like, I don't need to know those final steps just yet. I can clarify those with you later on. But if I've got a compass that's telling me I'm heading in the right direction, that's probably enough. Because it's another one of those things that then wanting to know, it's another drive for perfectionism and all that type of stuff of needing to know everything. That was a concept that,
I love it.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to think if there's anything else, any other bits and pieces from that.
So a bit connected to to what you focus on and growth, and this idea that, to me, there's people that we work with early on in their chiropractic career where they don't really have a lot of the skills that you need to grow a practice. And so they have this a rapid upswing where they go from one level to another level to another level. And there's this really common thing of getting to a plateau. And I think one of the most common reasons that chiropractors will come and want to work with me is they feel like they're stuck at whatever level and in whatever domain that is relevant to them. And it's common that when I'm talking to them about, okay, so here are some things that you could do differently, that there's almost in this, we have this model that, well, I'm stuck at this level, so if I do something different, I'm going to grow from that level. Whereas there's often this dip where you actually go backward a little bit. And I felt like the stuff that he spoke about there, about a whole lot of literature that shows that where you do hit a plateau, there is almost always that little bit of regression in skill or whatever when you develop a new skill set to get better. And I love the metaphor that he had of, if you hunt and peck with your typing, and you do a lot of it, you can get to a certain level. But if you actually want to get to a higher level of speed, you've actually got to completely change your technique and
Yes.
train yourself in proper typing technique, and your speed will go backward for a little while and then accelerate past that. And so, sort of similar to the idea of expecting discomfort, expecting if you're doing something new that will get you to the next level, that it's okay if there's a little bit of a dip. And I think in something that's like what both you and I are training people
Yes.
on, yeah, if you've got into a habit of doing things a particular way, it's giving you the results that you're at, but you're familiar with it and it feels comfortable, and you can do it as smoothly and with as much impact as that strategy is going to have. If you want to apply a better strategy, yeah, there'll be a little dip there while you build up skill in it before you move ahead.
Yes. I'm warning, quick golf story coming up here. Just people, just that little 30-second kind of button, when the ads come on your podcast. Hit two of those now, okay? A guy by the name of Victor Hovland, I think, who was the third-ranked golfer in the world last year. He did win a bunch of money there too, but there was clear distance between him and the first two guys, and as a result, never won any of the majors and didn't really look like it. Went back over and he had a breakout year last year to get to third, so it would have come from outside the 10 to get in there. Realised and had the grace and the maturity inside him to go, I need to do something different, and changed over his swing, all those bits and pieces. Now, as a result, the first 6 months of this year have been horrific for him, like has barely cracked into top 50s until just last week when again, finally it's all, but to have it was to see that in actual play out, that he's somebody who said, what got me to here is not going to get me to there.
Yeah.
So, and to have the courage and to deal with that too is phenomenal. So that was a great thing from me too, to realize that there is some going backwards before going forwards there.
And I think he added on to that idea of, if you are stuck at a level, that the things that you need to do something different. And that could be doing a new course, looking at some new resources, or he spoke quite a lot about the values and limitations of mentors that I thought was really useful. He spoke about that in general, mentors, if to be effective, you're actually, because they may have a completely different personality and the environment that they're in could be different to what you are. And I'm thinking of it through chiropractic lens, in that the things that I used to build a practice 20, 30 years ago, they're clearly, like, I can't tell people to, just make sure you have a really good yellow pages. Not that was, but there's clearly things that are different now. So you've got to look at the lens of where that feedback's coming from, and often that having a couple of mentors who are helping explain what they found helpful in the process that they went through to develop their practice or become skilled at something will help you see what's going to apply for you. So I thought that was a really useful thing, because I think sometimes we talk about just get a mentor, and it's like, well, yeah, a mentor is only going to be as useful as the similarities in you and the similarities in the environment and those sort of things. But having multiple mentors is measurably better, because you can almost blend the input. And I also...
sorry. Well, I think that kind of comes into that point of, and it's an easy mistake to, and I know I have fallen from this, and I very much did in the early stages of my business, is that here's something that worked for me, and so let me teach you why I think it worked for me. And the classic thing I see happen in the chiropractic profession, if we say that, if I'm wanting to do a report of findings in your initial consultation, I think of there being two key components to that. I think there's the message, and so that's the words, and often that's what we teach. But what's totally ignored often is the messenger.
Yeah.
So, and so it's like you should, put 100 chiropractors together and you'll get 105 different ways to do a report of findings, all of which might be effective. And so, that was a nice wake up for me too, in that, when I'm the idea of, when someone's just blindly telling you to do something, it's like, I got to watch out for that as a reason why to do it. And if you can kind of deconstruct it in terms of, here's what I did and here's why I did this, and you might want to do it this and that way there, but it's not so much the words, it's what kind of underpins that. I think that's what you do such a lovely job at doing, and certainly we do our best to emulate that as well.
Yeah. No, so think that was really good. Like as a whole playbook of if you actually really want to get better, to me, a lot of those distinctions are super important and kind of putting a context because I feel like, yeah, there's some people who are not available to input from others. It's almost like, well, they've got a story around, yeah, well, that was all right for you because you're whatever, you were practicing in the 80s and 90s or whatever. That's all right for you because you're a confident speaker, or that's all right for you because whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's other people who just listen slavishly to, well, this works for X, or this is what they said I should do, and so I'm just doing that. And it's like, and you, as you said, there's that people buy the messenger before they buy the message, and people can pick out inauthenticity very, very clearly. And so,
Yes.
yeah, I thought it was a nice way of navigating that.
Yeah. The third stage of the book here, which I don't know that we need to talk a lot about, but I'm happy to be led by you, is, they talk about building systems of opportunity. So, it's a lot in terms of how schooling system works. If you're interviewing people, what you should be looking for, where interviews go wrong, all that type of stuff there too, which I found interesting, but not immediately applicable unless I was kind of in HR or, in onboarding people into my university degree and stuff like that as well. And,
I think it was probably, just not that applicable. I think, he is an academic and he, I think, works a lot with bigger organizations where they're viewing hidden potential through the lens of, all right, I've got all these people on my payroll who have potential that is being hidden. So how can I create a system that makes it easier to untap that? So, I was similarly, that last part of it, I was looking very much at the percentage that I was up to on my Kindle, hoping that I was close to 100%. And then it's one of those books with a lot of notes, footnotes.
Huge.
So I got to 60, 58%, and then it was like, oh, finished. I was like,
yes, very funny. Me the same way, thinking I was well behind my time frame for this meeting here, and then all of a sudden I went, let me just check the chapters for this, and went, got me. Like, yep, this is done. But all in all, I think, if this piques your interest, it's definitely worth a read, or I think we've done a good job of summarizing the bits and pieces from it there too. But definitely one of the more enjoyable books that I have read of recent. So great suggestion, buddy.
Thank you. And just to add to that, I think it's one of those books where I feel like I've read a lot in this sort of area, this idea of skill development, whether, the talent code or so good they can't ignore you. But like, it's an area that I've looked at. What does it actually take to get better at something? And both of those books are books that I sort of feel like were very influential in terms of how I've tried to structure things in terms of training people. So I read this thinking, well, it's likely to come with a very similar message. And I was really pleasantly surprised how much it's sort of made me see something that I felt like I was pretty across in a new way. And in particular, that idea of harmonious passion and deliberate playfulness and those sort of things. Like, how can we do this stuff that's important to do and make it sort of fun and light at the same time? So that's kind of what I'm playing with on the way out of it.
Yeah. Love it, dude. I'm still percolating a lot of these ideas. Insane. Looking for ways that I can add play into lots of stuff that too. Reminding myself about the importance in changing my relationship with discomfort has been one of the other things that has been a great gift. The next book that we're going to be talking about, we won't give you a time frame on it yet, is going to be Cal Newport's new book called Slow Productivity. So if you wanted to kind of download or buy and read that book there too, and keep an eye out, I'm sure we'll be back sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks or so with a discussion around that. All
Perfect.
right. Buddy, as always, a wonderful pleasure. I enjoy reading these books with you because it makes me sit and think and learn more, knowing that there's going to be an avenue through which I have to kind of teach it, if it's for lack of a better word. It's not really teaching it, but at least kind of talking about it as well. So until next time, bud, see you soon.
Thanks, mate. The pleasure was all mine.
If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.